Welcome to The Cow Behind the Barn, a podcast exploring humanity, the world, and the divine as experienced and interpreted by an artist. I'm Kevin Caldwell, a co-founder of the Table Collective. Beginnings. Specifically, where and when did I begin? It seemed like a simple question until I really started to look at it. At the end of the prequel, I said I thought that this episode should explore beginnings, personal beginnings, and therefore that question, where and when did I begin? The simple answer would just be Arcadia, California, March 5th, 1958. And then I could go on to talk about my early childhood. And in keeping with my approach in the podcast, I could bring in insights from the early years of religious founders like Moses and Muhammad and Jesus and the Buddha. And I could include poems or songs inspired by my own beginnings. And I'll get there, maybe in the next episode. But the reality is that the answer to the question where and when is more complicated than just giving you a city and a date of birth. I mean, just one obvious example, did I begin where and when I was born, or where and when I was conceived? Is our conception even when we began? It turns out that the simple question, where and when did I, or you, or anyone for that matter, begin, includes at least three major assumptions. Where assumes we know what a place is, and so what the physical world is really like. When assumes ideas about time, as does my use of did and begin, which assume a clear starting point, a dividing line that I did not exist prior to a beginning point measured on a clock. And I, or any pronoun for that matter, assumes ideas about person, or self and selves, what it means to be an I, a you, a we, a they, etc. But here's the thing. Philosophers and scientists and religious founders and artists have, each in their various genres of expression, given us very, very different ways to see and experience those things. Packed inside that simple question, where and when did I begin, are questions about the nature of time, the nature of the self, the nature of physical space. I'll get back to the questions about time and self in future episodes. In this episode, I've decided I'm going to focus on where, and so place, and so the nature of the physical world. But how to start exploring that? The fact is that where we're born and raised goes a long way to determining our culture and our language. And I say a long way and not the whole way, because even when the language and culture of our home differs from that of the place and the culture where a family might live, the surrounding context affects a child in that home in a very powerful way. Where we're raised shapes our culture and language, and culture and language go a long way in shaping what we think about the world. And so, however I answer the question, where did I begin? It's going to be shaped to a great degree by where I began. So where do I start? Since my starting point will already have been influenced by my conclusions. My relationship to my starting point, my where, is even more complex, though, than just the language and the cultural and the contextual factors that shape me. One of the more unsettling discoveries from quantum physics and mathematics over these past years is that things and objects do not have properties independent of our observing of them. The world is not dried cement. Even the smallest particles making up the world as we know it change simply by the fact of being observed, experienced, engaged with. Things are not what we see until we see them, is one thing that physicists have said. Or touch them, or smell them, or hear them. So what does this have to do with where? Well, where refers to a place. And places, of course, are a combination of things, and things consist of subatomic particles, the qualities of which change when measured and observed, which means that places are changed by the people who live there, which means that a place is the sum total of the experiences of all the people who have changed that place by being in it and experiencing it and observing it. And that in turn, of course, changes and affects the people living there, which changes how they experience where they are, which again changes the places, which again changes the people. So embedded in the question of where you and I began is a mysterious entanglement between myself and the things that combine to make up the places I might suggest as my answer. So, for example, where and when did I begin? Was it Phoenix, Arizona, as my conception? Arcadia, California, where I was born? Burbank, California, and Granada Hills, California, the first couple of years of my life? Bakersfield, California, where I moved by the age of 5. I want to share a poem from my book, The Cow Behind the Barn. I wrote it decades ago originally, and I revised it for the book, but I really wasn't consciously at the time of writing or revising thinking about quantum ways of seeing things. The poem is called Hunting, and at the center of it is an extended description of an experience of entanglement and interconnection between a hunter and their prey. The poem came to me through my own imagination and intuition, but rereading it now, I am struck by the way in which, expressed in different words and arrived at by different methods, there is something suggestive, even complementary, in how quantum physics describes reality and how my imagination described it. It makes me wonder if the creative way and the scientific way of seeing and experiencing and describing the world are just that, different ways of seeing and experiencing and describing, ways that can illumine each other. So here's the poem. Hunting. I run gun in hand behind panting hounds that flow like floodwater through the oaks. I follow, my mind full of the scene I will find. A snarling terror pinned against a tree, the dogs who will part as I raise the polished steel, the eyes of my prey when I take my aim. I arrive. There's already blood on the ground and in the teeth of hounds, and plastered into the fur of the cornered beast, a hair. I lower the barrel, stoop to a knee, touch a patch of the red chalky dust, put a finger to my tongue, and taste the musky metallic living animal heat. The hair is longer up my arms, wiry on my legs, bristling down my back. I hear, smell, see, fear, flee, stumble in the dust, gasping heart, limbs burning, dart right, leap. There are teeth ripping, a sudden fire, legs fail. There is wood, a tree. I turn. A man. He's on a knee, a finger to his lips. I stand beneath the tree, gun on the ground. The beast is still. Drying blood turns to flakes of rust on a fallen leaf. Quantum physics describes an entangled world, the most minute particles of which are affected merely by being observed. The poem describes not only a physical but a psychological connection, an entangled consciousness between the hunter and the rabbit. Whatever else consciousness may be, and that's a topic we'll have to come back to, it is a way of observing and experiencing. My consciousness of something, animate or inanimate, or of someone, affects and changes that thing or person and changes me. Now, everything so far has assumed a local or nearby connection. The hunter was near the rabbit, so a local, proximate connection between us and things and places. But I recently came across a 2022 article in Scientific American called "The Universe is Not Locally Real," and the physics Nobel Prize winners proved it. In it, the author, Daniel Garisto, describes how 2 Nobel Prize winners demonstrated that objects are not only affected by what we might call local factors, by the things we see in space and time in a place, or what can reach them even at the speed of light. Their work showed that there are influences from far further, away than such local influences and observations, moving faster than the speed of light, which also affect the nature of each and every thing and object. Now, it seems that it's not only places and things and persons that are near each other that are entangled. The entire universe seems to be entangled across vast distances of time and space. Everything potentially affected by everything potentially affecting every other thing. I was once driving through the state of Nebraska in the United States with one of my daughters, and I saw an old truck abandoned in the middle of a field of corn. I remember thinking to myself, there was a day when somebody drove that truck to that spot and left it there on purpose. And there's a story behind that. Eventually, I wrote the story as I imagined it, in the form of a song. And here's an acoustic, home-recorded version of the song, which I called Omaha. Saw it sitting in a field near Omaha, Nebraska, rust and steel. There was burning sun, there was corn and weeds, and they were growing through the windows of that old truck outside Omaha, Nebraska. So I stopped beside the road to hear the story that old truck might have told. I put my hand on that truck near Omaha, Nebraska, heard it whisper to me like an old friend who told the story of a man who once had loved a woman somewhere here, somewhere near Omaha, Nebraska. And I could almost hear them breathe as they rode beneath the sky in a cool Nebraska breeze, hand in hand in that truck near Omaha, Nebraska. She's dressed in white, she's got flowers in her hair. He's feeling nervous and uncertain as they pull up to the farmhouse, park the truck on the farm near Omaha, Nebraska. The kids will grow and years go by. The stars, the moon, and the clouds racing through the sky. But we all know the day will come, and yet it finds us trying to do that last thing left undone. The house is empty now near Omaha, Nebraska. The kids are gone. He's in the yard, he's kneeling down on the ground. He's got flowers in his hands. She's never leaving that old farm near Omaha, Nebraska. And I see him get up from her side, takes the keys and takes that old truck for one last ride. drives into the fields on the farm. Near Omaha, Nebraska, drives as far as it will go. Just leaves it there beneath the sun in the weeds. The wind and the weather, there it waited just for me. Near Omaha, Nebraska. Now, can a hunk of metal absorb the stories of the people whose lives intersected with it? Can a hand on an old truck unlock those stories? I don't know, but I wonder. I mean, are there objects which collect and store our thoughts? And can we download those thoughts? Do things function in a sense the way a computer might, where we can program our experiences and thoughts into it by contact with it and then download those later? I don't know. But I wonder about the objects that I touch and the plants that I walk past and the memories of the redwood trees that I see almost daily. I wonder. I once asked an audience during a set of my songs to imagine the people who had sat in their chairs before them and the people who would come and sit in those chairs after them. I asked them to imagine what the experiences of those people might be and what, I don't know, sense of themselves, aura almost, they might have left in those objects, and what might we be leaving behind, and can we be more intentional about those things? How entangled is everything, really? Are there ways that we sort of program things, as I said just a moment ago, ways we download and retrieve the things that others have programmed? Now, so far we've listened to the conceptual world of quantum physics and the imaginative world of artistic imagination, but there are other ways of describing the entanglement and connection of the world, very ancient ways. I'm going to use 3 examples from the Bhagavad Gita, the teaching of the Buddha, and the Gospel of John. Let me start with the Gita. In the 13th chapter, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, who the 2 main characters in the Gita, the nature of the world of observed reality. And he uses 2 concepts that are mysterious to us, the concept of prakriti, or the field, as it's explained in that chapter, and purusha, the knower of the field. Prakriti represents the ever-shifting canvas of creation, the totality of the natural world from which all forms and bodies and minds arise. Earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intelligence, and false versions of the self are all ingredients of Prakriti. Their various combinations, and that's a key word, account for all the material objects that make up the universe. Purusha can be described as consciousness, even soul, though it's important to note that it has a higher and a lower aspect in the Gita. The higher is the supreme unchanging self, pure consciousness, if you will, and the lower aspect of Purusha refers to the individual soul, the knower of the field, which is entangled and changes like the rest of what makes up Prakriti, the natural observed world. Now, according to the Gita, every aspect of reality is some combination of these 2, Purusha and Prakriti. I've come across several metaphors that try to explain that. For example, in one metaphor, Prakriti and Purusha are referred to as collaborators working together, or in another as 2 primordial lovers who co-create the universe together, or in another as sort of 2 dimensions of a cosmic ballet. They affect and are affected by each other. Now, I should note that in the Gita, the goal of Krishna's teaching is to guide us to get free from such entanglement, and to come closer to so-called pure consciousness. That's a topic for another time. But for now, my aim is just to show that centuries ago, the Gita was describing the kind of connection and entanglement we've been talking about here. And I've been trying to talk about it in my art as well, and physicists in their way. What about the Buddha? Well, one of the Buddha's teachings is that we do not know the existence and reality of a thing as it is. We know our perception of the thing. There is the apparent existence of something and the actual existence of it, which may not be discoverable or describable. So, for example, he says, things have no reality in themselves. They are like heat haze or mirages rising from the ground. And goes on to say that the attempt to grasp existence and non-existence of things is like, quote, spider webs among spider webs, which can never take hold of the enormous bird of reality. Now, though the Buddha is skeptical about the way perception corresponds to reality, he's saying that we and things are entangled, our perception and their existence. In many ways, who we think we are is the result of our experiences and perceptions of the world, which begins to touch on Buddha's ideas of the self, and again, that's a topic for another time. But putting the Buddha's insight in my own words, I would say we do experience something, and our experience is in some way connected to the thing and shaped by the thing that we experience. Things become part of who we are because our perceptions of the thing are part of who we are. Our experience of all the things in our lives shapes who we are or who we think we are. Now I'm going to turn to the New Testament and to the Gospel of John, and really just mainly chapter 1. Referring to all of creation there in the first chapter, John employs a term that was going to be known and recognized by several different audiences who might come across his work, although each of those audiences would have understood the word that he used in a very different way, and the word is logos, or word. And John says that everything came to be in that word, a mysterious term, and that in that same word, life came to be. So according to John, the whole universe, all of life, is connected. It's entangled in that word. In later chapters, he goes on to talk about the entanglement of selves as well. When on the lips of Jesus, John writes, I and them, and they and me, and they and us, and you and me, etc. In John, that entanglement is centered in a divine personal being. This is a significant difference from the Buddha's teaching and from some statements in the Gita, though the Gita includes verses that are more similar to John as well. But to repeat a refrain, that's something that we can come back to later. My main point right now is that physics, the arts, and religious heritages have in different ways, with different vocabulary and using different metaphors, described entanglement, connection, a sort of connective tissue, if you will, between us and our world. And so between us and our where. As you can see, interconnection, entanglement fascinates me. It's a frequent theme in my poetry and my music. Before concluding, I want to share another example of that fascination and my own art that results from it. It's another song, and it assumes the fact of entanglement and interconnection of myself with all things, earth and wind and water and fire. But it also flows from a longing for that entanglement and connection. I haven't released the song yet, though maybe by the time this gets out there or that you're listening to it, it will be out there streaming somewhere. But I hope you'll take something from it. It's called Elemental Spirits. I'm gonna step onto the earth, gonna sink my feet deep in. I'm gonna let it bury all of me Let it soak into my skin. I'm in the earth, and the earth is in me. Elemental spirits, elemental spirits. I'm gonna step into the wind, open wide and breathe it in. I'm gonna feel it wrap around me, let it soak into my skin. I'm in the wind, and the wind is in me. Elemental spirits, elemental spirits. I'm gonna go down to the water. I'm gonna walk right in, sink down till it's all around me. Let it soak into my skin. I'm in the water is in me. Elemental spirits, elemental spirits. I'm gonna reach out for the fire. I'm gonna stick my hands right in. Let the heat and burn surround me. Let it soak into my skin. I'm in the fire, and the fire is in me. Elemental spirits, elemental spirits, elemental spirits, elemental spirits. Before we close, I want to suggest an experiential experiment with entanglement and connection. This is inspired by a podcast that I've been dipping into called Sufis of Morocco. The episode that I'm referring to here came from a January 14th, 2021 stream of that podcast. And after talking about the Muslim greeting, Assalamu alaikum, or peace be with you, the speaker continued by suggesting that such a greeting could be extended to everything, but in a unique way. Quote, whenever you see something, extend peace to it, not by saying Assalamu alaikum, but by seeing the light in it. Not by saying words, in other words, but by seeing the light that, as he had explained elsewhere in that episode, connects everything. So I'm going to invite us all to intentionally see the light in the next few days. And though the quote I referenced said, not by saying, I find it actually helps me to see if I also say. So I'm going to invite us this week to speak quietly to the things and the people in our world. Plants, rocks, trees, humans, animals, as I said, perhaps silently under our breath, to simply say something like this. I see you, and I say peace to you. I recognize the mysterious connection we have. I'm recording this actually in a hotel room in the Los Angeles area, and outside our hotel there's peacocks running around. And I actually tried this on a peacock this morning. I don't know what the peacock thought about it, but I'm curious to know what might happen as you try it and as I continue. Now to close, I return to the question, where did I begin? I want to allow myself to get more personal about my answers. So in the next episode, I'm going to use some of my own beginnings as an example. And I'll dig a little more into how the places where I began are all entangled in who I am and I in them. And I hope to invite you to some discoveries of your own. Until next time.